Welcome back, everybody, to the Wrestling Trading Card Collector Series on WTCtv. Now, tonight's an episode, Tony, you'll agree, we've been looking forward to this one for a while, haven't we?
I have. I have. I think I brought did I bring his name up to you?
Well, we started
Or
talking before the holidays that wouldn't it be cool to do something with Retro Mike and talk about
yeah.
his history because we see about Retro Mike all the time, but we
Yeah.
don't know much about the guy. So everybody, we're pleased to announce the guy that's normally asking the questions gets to be in the spotlight today. Retro Mike Lutz from Pennsylvania. Mike, thanks, brother, for joining us.
Thanks
Um,
for having
Welcome.
me.
Yeah, like now Retro Mike is one of the OGs in the card hobby, like ourselves. He's been around for a long time, not just wrestling cards. He's an across the board guy, and we're going to talk to Retro Mike about his beginnings in the hobby as a kid when he was probably just modern day Mike. He wasn't retro yet. When he
Yeah,
was
yeah.
when he was just collecting as a kid, and then in later life he owned a card store. We're looking forward to learning all about that because I don't know anything at all about your past business, so that's going to be awesome. And then, of course, if you're in the hobby large, you know about the Retro Card podcast that Mike does on a regular basis with his buddies, and that's informative about all sorts of going ons with manufacturing, football, baseball, hockey, and to our benefit, last year you hooked up with Anthony and started doing wrestling content, and we're going to get into that a little bit. So, Mike, welcome. Tony, nice to see you.
Always good to see you, buddy.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
So
Yeah, happy to
yeah,
be.
so we'll get right into it. We'll start Retro Mike with your earliest days in the hobby. What got you started in into collecting cards and collectibles in general?
Well, I mean, I was big into baseball. I was that kid that was into all sports when I was younger, but specifically baseball. I remember I think it was an uncle or a cousin or some relative, like a more distant relative, that gave me a bunch of 1974 Topps baseball when I was younger. And I still have quite a few of those cards today, but like probably by the late 70s and early 80s, I was buying all kinds of packs of cards. We had a little convenience store right at the end of the block where I lived. So I got to a point where I would go down there and buy whatever they had. I have a story. I have a Wayne Gretzky rookie over my shoulder here that I
Ooh, painful to good
pulled.
old Paul.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
No,
I
this
pulled.
guy, yeah, a Canadian guy talking about weight. I had six of them in a gym bag, Mike,
Yeah.
at one point when I was in grade seven, you know.
The
And
funny
so
thing with that was though, I didn't watch hockey in 1979. I
right.
just bought the cards because they had them. And I remember like then I really started to get into it with my dad and stuff like as a teenager. And I remember seeing a copy of a Beckett that had a picture of the Wayne Gretzky rookie card. And a light bulb went off. I'm like, that looks familiar. And I ended up having it in my box of cards. Now it's beat a little bit. It's an SGC4, but like it was actually a card I pulled out of a pack from when I was a kid. So, I loved cards. I used to like play a game with cards. I made up my own games and like would play with them on the floor and stuff. So I had to have as many cards as possible because I was a completionist back then. Like I didn't like to have baseball cards and be missing a player from a team. So
Yeah, I know that one well.
Mhm.
yeah, so that's pretty much how I got into it. And like I said, like every kid, you have periods where you're into it a little more and a little less. But I was pretty much into it all the time. Once you get to your teenage years and you do cooler stuff a little bit, it wasn't into it quite as much. But yeah, that's pretty much where it all started for me.
When did wrestling cards become part of that collection?
Wrestling cards more so when I got back into the hobby. Like that, I mean, I've been a fan of wrestling since the early 80s. I used to stay up and watch it at 11 o'clock at night. And then we were luckily one of the early places that got TBS. And so I started watching Georgia Championship Wrestling. And I loved Ric Flair, and my one friend loved Dusty Rhodes, and we bought all the magazines. So I've been a wrestling fan for well over 40 years. And when I got back into the hobby, I was like, I want to collect something too. And I was like, I love wrestling. Why don't I get into wrestling cards? So that was pretty much where I started that. I wish I would have collected wrestling cards when I was younger, or even when I had my shop. I would have had a much nicer and bigger and more valuable collection now. But unfortunately, I missed the boat on that one.
Was it just cards, Mike, or do you get into anything else? Do you ever get into figures or games or t-shirts or, because there's so many belts.
I did have a stretch where I collected figures, especially not so much the 80s stuff. I did have the LJNs and stuff in the 80s, and I remembered having the thumb wrestlers. I liked
Oh
those.
yeah.
You could wrestle an actual match with them better because you could make the limbs bend and stuff. So I thought they were much better than like the Hasbro and the LJN. So I had quite a few of the thumb wrestlers and stuff. But then like during the Attitude Era and stuff, when they started coming out with the cooler figures and stuff, I got into quite a bit of them for a while. And just recently, before I actually got back into cards, I got rid of most of that stuff, moved into a new house, started a new life, and had all these, all these figures on cards and stuff, and didn't really have any place to put them.
Should have met him sooner. Could have.
Yeah,
my store.
But that's often the story, like Chuck was the same way, had a massive figure collection, but they just occupy too much space. Cards are good that way, like I've got 35,000 cards that takes up a wall essentially. So it doesn't, but if you're into figures, you're into belts, if you're into, people collect real memorabilia, ropes and such, you have to dedicate rooms of your house,
yeah, you really do.
entire basements. So, Mike, your claim to fame was your card shop, I think. You talk about it often, but I don't know anything about it. So let's go right back to, so you're always a card collector, sometimes more, sometimes less, but at some point the opportunity came for you to start an LCS. So
Yeah.
tell us about that, dude.
When I was in college and stuff, my dad and I started to get back into collecting cards. This was the late 80s and early 90s. And my dad was the type of person, he was an entrepreneur. He started all kinds of businesses and stuff, and he came up with the idea one time, maybe we could open a card shop sometime. There was nothing really locally in our town at the time like that. And I graduated from college, and instead of going on and getting my master's degree, I came back home. And part of it was because I was playing in a band at the time. I was a musician, and I really wanted to pursue that part of my life. And the card shop ended up being my job. So yeah, we opened up in October of 1991 was when we officially opened up. And just knowing my luck too, we had another card shop that literally opened up right across the street, like a couple months before my shop opened. So that was kind of an interesting thing though. Danville, Pennsylvania was the town, like we're like 5,000-6,000 people there, but we had two card shops, and they were literally right across the street.
Now, what was the name? I didn't catch the name of your business. What was your card shop?
It was Mike's Upper Deck is what it was called at the time. So
like the same town, man. It's crazy. Like I can totally sympathize with that, because I'm the only all pro wrestling store in Arizona, and yet right next door in Suite 103 is a guy who wants to be a wrestling store.
Oh yeah, I know, it's ridiculous. And I will say that I won the war a number of years later. I bought them out, so I feel like I can claim victory. So that was fun. But yeah, it was interesting times, no doubt. And like, I got into comics, and they also got into comics. It was just like everything we sold, we were like in direct competition with each other.
Isn't that bizarre? Like everything my wife and I do to try to do better for our store ends up being mimicked by, as I refer to them as numbnuts next door. And as far as decorating your windows and putting out a banner flag and upgrading your banner up front, your store sign out front, and all these things, it's like, it's just crazy to me. It's like,
yeah,
dude, be original.
But I mean, if you're doing something and they see it and they didn't have that idea, they're automatically going to do it. So yeah, I mean, I lived that for, they were probably open at least 6 or 7 years of, we were both open together in Danville.
Wow.
So, you know what they say about imitation and flattery, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
How many years total, Mike, did you have it going in that location? It was just the one location throughout?
I closed in the end of 2004, so it was just about
13
years
Oh, wow, you
altogether.
had a good run then.
Yeah, I mean, especially in a little town, and the card market in the early 90s was really hot, and then it died off big time in the mid 90s and late 90s. So, I do take a lot of pride in the fact I was able to keep my store open. I was able to make a living for myself. I mean, it was a lot of work. I'm sure, Tony, you totally understand that. You own a business like that, you're always doing something. There's no, I'll do it tomorrow. You just have to do it. And I spent a lot of Saturdays there. Like I was an early adopter on eBay, and I would like close at 1 o'clock on Saturday, but then I'd do all my eBay listings for the week, and I'd be there till 10, 11 o'clock sometimes. So
And you're still quite active with that eBay part of it, right? You still sell a lot of cards or not as much?
yeah, I don't. I mean, like it ebbs and flows.
I see your hand is still in it on Mike's Monday night thing. You're often in there with stuff,
Yeah, I mean,
sometimes
I
free.
sell a lot of cards on Twitter. Like
Yeah.
doing stack sales I do on Twitter now are really like my main focus. So I mean, I have a real job, so you only have so much time in the day. And I would love to like go through everything in my eBay store, pull most of it down, and I have so much stuff I do want to list also on the eBay store, but like the stack sales I do on Twitter take a lot of time, and I have a life, I have a real job, I have a wife.
I said to Tony pretty much a year ago when I was down there, I think it's exactly a year because it's Royal Rumble this weekend, right?
Yep.
There's a business here with all these cards in the internet. And I'm sure a year later, whilst the cards are probably organized, thanks to Nick, we're still nowhere close to the big internet store I envisioned because of the time. It's all time
Yeah,
consuming.
It's
It's a
a lot
lot
of
of
labor.
work,
especially when you're doing it pretty much yourself too. Like,
Yep.
Yeah.
if you have
You
like
have
the
to wear
big
all hats, right?
that have other people that help them out, they can do more. But like I'm a one-man show with everything I do. So, that's the time going to shows, going to shops and acquiring the stuff, which takes hours and hours and hours too. So, and then going through it and comping the prices and just like to the right of me over here, I have gigantic stacks of basketball cards because I'm starting a basketball sale tomorrow night. And like, this is only a tiny part of it. I'm going to do it for like 9 straight days. So I'm going to be overwhelmed. I'm going to have cards everywhere, but I'll do the work because it's not really work at the end of the day. It's
Yeah, it's
fun.
our hobby and it's fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you say you got a regular job now, but you're still actively purchasing and very much in part of the hobby and still doing a lot of sales with it. And so it's still a big thing for you.
Yeah. My Twitter sales do really well. And
Great.
yeah, the sad thing is like when I closed my shop, I walked away from cards. I didn't look at them for what was it, 2000, like 17 years. And I had the one friend EP who's on the podcast with me kept saying, cards are getting hot again. Cards are getting hot again with COVID and everything and the boom. I had a lot of leftover inventory. I have probably 750,000 cards that I had in storage, and I started going through those, and I had a lot of Tom Brady rookie cards and stuff because like in 2004 when I closed my shop, Tom Brady wasn't really Tom Brady yet.
Right.
So I had a lot of his cards in my commons boxes. So I pulled out probably about 200 cards. I sent them to PSA. I got stuff graded. I'm like, I'm just going to sell my cards here. I'm going to make my money. I've been waiting all this time on this stuff. I'm going to make my money on it and get out. I don't care about cards. Well, here we are over 3 years later, and I'm more into it, I think, than maybe I ever was. So it's hard to get it out of your system once you get back into it. And I do enjoy it. And I enjoy like the people and, just like going to the card show and talking to other dealers and
We're
stuff.
we're very similar, Mike. I play music as well. In fact, we're in my studio now. If I'm blurred my background, you see guitars and stuff all here.
Mhm.
And same. I liked wrestling, but I was into music and into card collecting, and since I was a kid. So to that point, I think it's hard to get out of your system when you've been living it throughout, like I never felt compelled, like, oh, you still watch wrestling? I was, yeah, proudly. You still collect cards, you're
Yeah.
still playing music. Like for me, it was like this for me. Why wouldn't you want to do the things in life that are fun? Right.
Mhm.
Another
Absolutely.
question before we get off your store. Do you remember back in the day when you ran the Mike shop, what you moved most of? Was it mostly baseball or would it have been football? And
It was mostly I sold a lot of football because I was a big football fan at that time. And a lot of people that came in, I would, a lot of people that collected football, they'd come in, we could talk football. But baseball has always been a big seller too. Basketball had its moments, like, when the Kobe Bryant rookie year, the sales spiked, LeBron James, but like basketball wasn't a consistent seller through the whole time. It was mostly the football and the baseball. I had a spell too, like in the early 90s, I was a huge hockey fan. And I sold a lot of hockey cards up until like 94 when they had the lockout, and the people that were just getting into hockey never came back. So unfortunately, that had a little bit of a time period there, but hockey was then pretty much nothing the rest of the time I was open.
I don't need to tell you about hockey up here in Toronto, man. You know,
Yeah,
it's
I bet.
it's insane. Every corner store, the Tim Hortons,
Yeah,
wherever you go, you can buy a pack of hockey cards up here. It's crazy.
that's great.
All right, well, let's move on to your podcast, which you've been doing for some time now. And again, the Retro Card podcast isn't just wrestling. We'll get into the wrestling component of it, but you do everything with your buddy EP and your other friend. But before we talk about how you got that started, at what point did you become Retro Mike and the whole retro cards thing and that whole branding? It's really cool.
Well, when I was getting back into this, like I was going to use my old shop name, Mike's Upper Deck, but like because of Upper Deck cards and stuff, like in the internet and stuff now, like I was way more hesitant to use the name Upper Deck, even though like it is a generic sports term, like upper deck of an arena. So,
Mhm.
but like at that point, I was looking to just sell stuff. I didn't want any issues that I would create for myself. So I started looking at other ways to come up with a name, and the name Mike's Retro Trading Cards somehow stuck. And, you know, other people started calling me Retro Mike. That's just, I never call myself that. I'm just Mike. But you know, there are way too many, especially that's more of a wrestling card collector thing because nobody else calls me Retro Mike, but there are so many Mikes in the wrestling card Twitter and stuff that I
That's a
guess
wrestling. That's just like a wrestling trait, though. Everybody's got
yeah,
nicknames for each other, no matter
I'm
what.
good with it. I've been called much worse in my life, trust me.
Same.
So
Yeah.
how'd you guys get that going? Did you start that or did your buddies? How'd the podcast get rolling?
We started basically, you know, doing some grading reveals. I had that huge order for PSA, so I wanted to do a video. That was one of the things I got into when I started watching content. I liked the graded card reveals and I liked the box rips and stuff like that. So we did some of them, but my friends and I have been like, we probably spent a good 6 months or so before we finally decided to do one. We would stand around our shop, the three of us, and we would talk for hours. Like if you get the three of us together, we don't have to have a topic. We can talk all night long, and it's just the relationship we have. We had a group text forever. We're constantly texting. If you know somebody doesn't text in a day, we're like, "Are you still alive?" Like it's just an odd thing for us to not talk to each other. So
Sounds like Paul Chuckster and I.
Yeah,
yeah, and I
we
mean,
developed the same kind of bond. Yeah.
we just kind of wanted to try to capture something that was like, you know, coming into the shop and hanging out and talking about stuff. And you know, you guys do this, it takes you a while to get comfortable with it. Like I watch the early stuff and I like cringe like about how prim and proper we tried to be and stuff, but I feel like our personalities really come through now. And like people might hate it, people might like it, a lot of people seem to like it, which is nice,
Yeah,
but we're never going to
the
be
comments are always positive, it seems like.
yeah, I mean, we don't try to be anything we're not. We're
No,
not.
we're all catering to a fairly small audience, like
Yeah,
a good video is a few hundred views. We're not, tens of thousands where we need to be
yeah,
self-conscious about how we look and how we sound.
exactly.
We're doing this for ourselves and the small group of hardcore people like us that consume this stuff, which,
Mhm.
5 years ago, none of this existed where you had a choice of to go
Yeah.
out and get your sports cards information. So that's great. So you started the show and you focused on just different topics that would come to mind, like were you producing it, or was it sort of really off the cuff ad lib? Let's just go and talk about whatever comes to mind.
Yeah, we always came up with ideas. Like at first we were doing more like evergreen kind of collecting things and stuff. And we started doing a little bit of news and we kind of morphed into, okay, well, let's talk about what's going on in the hobby any given week. And, you know, we like the format. Like other people do their individual videos during the week about all this stuff. But, you know, this is again, like if you collect cards, this is kind of our virtual store. So this is you coming in and, you know, talking with us and getting to hear what we're saying. Like again, we're not experts. I'm not a lawyer. So like when the Panini thing with the WWE, with them dropping them, I didn't know where it was going to go, but it's fun to talk about what might happen.
Well, you
And
have an
that's,
opinion, and
yeah,
that's
and
what
that's
we
what
all are.
you
None of
do
us are
too.
experts. We're just guys that live and breathe this every day. We enjoy
Absolutely.
it. And the
Mhm.
sum total of our knowledge allows us to have discussions like this where we can sort of relate to things. So, I consider anyone that takes the time to put the Zoom on and just speak honestly about things to be an expert because you believe in what you're saying, right? No one's
Oh
out there
yeah.
trying to provide misinformation. So congratulations on that. And then last year you got into the wrestling world. So let's
Mhm.
talk about how that all came about.
I mean, it wasn't something I was seeking. It was just more or less Anthony got in touch with me and said, "Hey, would you be interested in hosting a podcast?" And I'm like, "Sure, I guess. Why not?" So, like, that's literally how it happened. So, uh, you know, I like talk about wrestling cards. Like Anthony is way more knowledgeable about stuff than I am. So sometimes, I sit there and I feel a little uncomfortable because like talking with like Rich Veligan about Japanese wrestling cards, like I don't know anything about them, but I can be the voice of people who don't know anything about them. And that's pretty much the role I try to play. Like I try to learn from some of the stuff that's presented, just like maybe some of the viewers are. So I try to be maybe the viewer's surrogate. I don't try to act like I'm an expert because a lot of that stuff, like his knowledge goes way beyond anything I have in wrestling cards.
We also talk about stuff like you said earlier about what was going on with Panini and
Mhm.
larger sort of macro issues, and some of your shows deal with those topics as well, which
Yeah.
is and you're knowledgeable in that stuff. I mean, when that stuff all came around, you were talking about it. We were all talking about what was going to happen as much as we could have forecasted, and doing that kind of content.
Yeah, I mean, we all have opinions, especially wrestling card collectors. We all have opinions. Some of us have very loud and strong opinions, but I mean, that's just who we are. And yeah, like it is fun to talk about it. I wish there wasn't as much drama in the wrestling card community, but at the end of the day, I'm an old man. I don't have control over how some of the characters act, and a lot of them are just going to be how they are, and that's their personality, and that's how they want to be. I don't like to necessarily be that way. Like, and sometimes, Paul, I've talked to you about this too. Like, sometimes you feel like you're stuck in the middle, like
You remember
between.
the very first time we
Yeah.
communicated? I think I said, "Hey, Mike, love what you've been doing, and we might find ourselves getting caught in the crossfire every so often." And you
And we
kind of
did.
laugh, you kind of laugh back and laugh back at that. And then about 6 months later, things were getting heavier, and I said, "Shit, Mike, the crossfire's turning into nukes." Just checking in to let you know that I'm still cool with you.
It's
And
scorched earth.
it's
Like
cozy.
anybody who's
Yeah.
involved with it just gets hammered
Well,
by
you
it.
mentioned before loud and strong opinions, and that's what it is. And Tony and I were very sort of clued into the fact that we've got a couple of guys on this channel that don't groove with a couple of guys on your channel, and it was fairly important to me to make it clear that our what we do here, what Retro Mike's podcast and what the WTC Collector series is open to everybody, and I don't give a fuck about your grievances. You can
Yeah,
have them.
I agree.
We
Yeah.
we we don't behave that way, and it was important for us to make it clear by inviting Mike the Cleaner on, and by reaching out to you that we don't bear any ill will towards anything. Um, that you do or say. Anthony's a character. We know that, and he's passionate about this hobby. And sometimes we don't see eye to eye. But again, we're all here for the same reason, right? And we're all providing content that people want. And I think both of our shows go to show. And we do that. We're friendly with Zan. We're friendly with the Card Foundation guys. We really like the fact that we're able to provide this content to the community.
Yeah,
And
and you guys give a lot of content, and you do like different content than I do on the channel. I don't have a lot of wrestling content, and when I do, it's more so like graded card reveals or box rips. Like I'm not doing like current news about stuff like that. And like there's space in the content for everybody. Like people don't have to say, well, I'll only watch your podcast, or I'll like, it's silly. Like I watch many different content creators, sports creators. Like I like them all. Like I don't want to pick one. Like we're not competing. There's no trophy being given out. There's no money that's being given out to us. It's like we're just doing this because we like to do it. And
And
somewhere,
finally, someone says what I've been telling you, Paul, for a long ass times like that.
yeah. And
What I've been there's no hierarchy here. There's no podium to stand upon that says I am the
Exactly.
king and this is what ends all be all like that. These are all differences of opinions, people sharing their knowledge, trying to and hopefully helping people and educating them because we are a niche within a niche. So it's there's very few people that have been around long time in this hobby that seen things from the very beginnings, have been around before there were, you know, the David Pecks of the world and the Jamies and the Adams and all these different people characters. So you know, we just try to share our knowledge that we've learned all these years. And shit, we continue to keep learning things when we thought we knew something from 25, 30 years ago.
All the time.
We've talked all the time, which is so, to me, it's so fun because like, holy shit, you know, I didn't realize that that was the name of this and not this name. And, you know, I get quizzed all the time. I got PSA researchers and Beckett researchers emailing me on a biweekly basis. Like, we need further information about this. We've used your website to check this. We need some more information about it. Can you clarify this? So it's just
sometimes
nice,
we can't. Sometimes we can't.
Sometimes we
because it's
can't.
too far in the past, like the conversation we had about the chromies the other day. And you said there's a guy that wrote a book in Argentina, apparently, and he says something different than what we say. And I'm like, well, trust the guy in Argentina. We're just dudes that have been sort of collecting this stuff along the way, and we're going to make mistakes. We discovered the classics weren't even classics until 2 years ago, and you figured out who the real manufacturer of them were, you know. And this stuff happens all the time, you know.
Yeah. So that's it's part of the beauty of having being in the era that we live in now and all this technology that we have that, you know, I think the pandemic, one of the nice things about the pandemic was that it brought out about a lot of people being creative and thinking about like, you know, well, what am I passionate about and what can I go out and express and share knowledge about? It's like that. And then at the same time, also learning things because I'm sharing what I know. Well, holy shit, that's not true. Wait, this is what happened. Oh, really? Damn, all this time I thought this. And so it's just, it's cool to hear people's opinions like that. And with wrestling, for me, how I've always viewed it, and I talked to Paul and Chuckster about it privately all the time, was, you know, we've asked for a long, and I've said it on shows before, we've asked a lot to be taken seriously, that we're a serious hobby. You know, we're not just some little like, oh, you're a wrestling card collector? Get out of here with your toys. Go. People now, they look upon us as being legit. Like, wow, there's money that can be made in wrestling. There's really cool, interesting ways to collect within wrestling that are different from other, you know, pieces of cardboard. And so with that, you're going to have growing pains as you get bigger. You're going to have growing pains, and I just really think that some of this division that's happened over the last couple of years, it's just part of our growing pain process. And sooner or later, you know, it's like having, you know, it's just going to go away a little bit. Like, you know what? It just becomes, there's always going to be that little sector out there that does this and that.
It really is counterproductive. It doesn't do
it is. It's
anything to move the whole thing
counterproductive.
forward, right?
But at the end of the day, we're still going to move forward with or without this the division of it, if you want to call it. It's like the hobbies are going to grow with or without us. Exactly. I go away, you go away, Anthony goes away, Chuckster goes away, Retro Mike goes away. It doesn't matter. The hobby continues.
Yeah. It's bigger than any one of us at this point.
And like the drama, like it just like it. I don't know how anybody enjoys that. Like you can only do that for so long, and like
no, I think they enjoy it. I think they do. I think some of these guys.
Yeah,
and if I call them on it and I say, look, dude, you perpetuate it. You're a smart guy. You're smarter than the other guy. Why do you play into this? Why do you perpetuate it? And I get a sort of grin, like, you know, that's the way the world works. That's what the internet is. And this is okay. You like it, Tony. You know, you said, why do you do it? Oh, I don't cause shit. Yeah, you do. Why do you do it? You know. So again, Tony and I are past at this point being upset by it, but it was important for us to invite Mike the Cleaner onto our show. We're thrilled that you said yes to come and join us to let everyone know that look, we're all buddies here. We're in the same game here, and we love doing this, and it's great to talk to each other. And I thought it'd be really cool for us to get to know you a little bit better, Mike, because I didn't know anything about you other than the fact that all of a sudden you started hosting all this stuff with
Yeah.
Anthony wrestling. It's like, well, I've known Anthony for many, many years, but I don't know Retro Mike.
Yeah. So
I'm just a
when
podcast host. Like somehow I did not have that on my bingo card at 54 years
Yeah,
of
but
age, and I'm going to be on.
you've become an important name in the community now, you know.
Well, I mean, I don't know how important I am,
Oh,
but like
you're in
I
there,
appreciate
you know.
that. But like I just because sometimes I feel like I'm on the periphery of the wrestling card. Like I don't know if it's because I'm into everything and I do a lot of sports and a lot of my stuff's there that maybe the wrestling card collectors don't really consider me a true wrestling card collector. Maybe I'm not a true wrestling card collector. Like I enjoy them, but I have a ton of Paul Heyman cards and I love collecting his stuff. But other than that, I don't collect other people. But that's how a lot of us are in the wrestling
Yeah,
card.
there's no definition for it, is there?
Yeah,
Whether
so
you're crazy like me and you've been collecting all your life, or whether you just buy a few wrestling cards here and there because you like them. As soon as you buy that wrestling card, you're in, right?
yeah. My
Yeah.
wife thinks it's a little weird that I like collect middle-aged man as my PC, but I say you'd think it's a lot weirder though if I collected like a 23-year-old girl wrestler. And yeah, so she agrees with me on that.
something to be said about that too, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm not trying to disparage people that collect women wrestlers, but a lot of them do collect certain wrestlers because they think they're hot, and
Sure.
you get to a certain age where that's whatever. So,
I
good
don't know.
for
I haven't gotten there yet.
like
I'll let you know when I get there, Mike.
like I collect women. I collect Mae Young. Go ahead, knock me.
Yeah.
Knock me.
Well, yeah. They don't get any hotter than that.
Yeah. So, Mike, before we wrap up, what we like to do in the last segment is usually throw in a few anecdotes. And you, being a guy that does podcasts and had a store and loves to talk to hobby, why don't you throw us a couple of stories that just something that quickly off the top of your head that you think our audience might enjoy hearing?
Well, when I had my shop, I I used to get into a whole bunch of stuff. I had cards, and I got into video games, and then I had like VHS tapes and DVD tapes and CDs, all this stuff. I had this guy who used to come into my shop all the time asking me if I had the movie Liar Liar with Jim Carrey. The guy wasn't all there, but like if he didn't stop in once a week at least, and he'd be like, "Do you have Liar Liar?" And I'm like, "Nope, don't have it." And like I like he always came in asking about that movie, and I wish I would have had it, because I don't know what would have happened if I would have had it. And that's like one of my biggest regrets, is I didn't have that movie when he came in, because I needed that closure of what would have happened. Would he have actually bought it, or was he
Yeah, I
just
almost want to go to Best Buy, find it, and have it there just in case, huh?
yeah, maybe he was just checking to see if I had the movie. Wasn't interested in buying it. Maybe just
Yeah,
wanted
maybe.
to know. I don't know. And in his mind, but he had to do it. And I mean, this went on for a long time. So like
But did
the
you have
funny,
a lot of movies back then? Did you do that as well?
yeah, I mean, I used to be able to buy stuff for like next to nothing, like at yard sale prices almost. So, I had movies, I sold my store. I did a lot of that like in bulk on eBay and stuff too. I could sell the stuff. So, it really was a place where people could bring stuff. And that was part of the reason I wanted to get out of it too, because it started to get to the point where you'd have people that you knew were bringing stuff in because they needed to get a fix or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's hard. Like as I got a little older, like that became more and more difficult. And then not knowing, did you steal these from somebody to try, like, so
Yeah.
That's
just
that's the good guy in you. You know what I mean? Being
yeah,
compassionate about people, and you get older, you think more that way.
yeah.
The question: would you given the chance, would you do it again, Mike? Tony's just started a venture like a year ago.
God no. I mean, no. I mean, I enjoyed the time I did that, but it's so much work. And I'm at a place in my life now where I don't have to work as hard, and yeah,
Complexity reduction, right?
yeah, like I have a lot of respect for you, Tony, in doing that, and I wish you all the best with that, because I appreciate the work that goes into that, and like you have to love it, and like I did love it for a period of time, but I don't think I could commit to it at this point in my life again, like I did back then.
No,
Yeah,
Tony's got
I
the
got
passion.
bigger dreams and aspirations than this one store. So,
Yeah,
uh,
but that's great. Like I love that. Like the business, like I love the business side of like the hobby and stuff too. Like I'm fascinated by that. That's why, like with the whole licensing thing with Panini and WWE and all that stuff and the lawsuits, like I don't know anything about the law, but I am really interested in watching this stuff from like the business side of it, because it's kind of interesting like what Fanatics has done and the way they've kind of shoved themselves into everything, and the backdoor maneuvering that's clearly going on with some of this stuff. Like I find it fascinating, and I can't wait to see how all this stuff plays out, because there's just like I have a business degree. I've run businesses my whole life, so like I love that business side of it. And like that is one of the big draws to the hobby that I have. And one of the reasons I like doing the podcast, because we get to talk about a lot of that stuff.
yeah.
That's all I got. Tony, anything else?
No, I'm learning so much about Retro Mike here that I feel like we're almost like kindred spirits here in a sense, because I feel like we had a lot similarities here. Um, I I didn't do my business of opening a store at a young age. Here I am doing it at 54 years old, and it's just But I have, I guess I've got different dreams than just having just this one store. Like I plan on having a wrestling guy store Texas, and a wrestling guy store Colorado, and a wrestling guy store Nevada. I'm just having people run that business for me.
Well, it's
That'd be
funny. The other
great.
day, Tony texted me that, or it was on Facebook or something, where you said that in my mid 50s and I'm starting a business. And I said to myself, fuck, I'm in my mid 50s winding down all my businesses. I did that like 25 years ago when I had energy, and I don't know if I could do it again. Same reason, Mike. It's like I'm at the stage now where, I think I'm gonna go up and roll one and watch some Netflix, and that's, infinitely more enjoyable to me than worrying about how I'm gonna get my next paycheck.
Yeah, definitely. But Tony, you like if you didn't do it before, like I can totally see that desire. Like you
Yeah.
love this. And like who wouldn't love to be able to make a living out of doing that, even if you're starting it in your 50s? Like it doesn't matter. Like it's a passion project, and you have aspirations, you have goals for what you want to accomplish. So like I think that's great. Like
Kind of how I look at it with the cards. I mean, doing anything we done for WTC started as a labor of love because of, a long time collector and trying to house something like that. And along the way, you develop relationships with people, keep networking and get more relationships. And, the store, I don't know if I could have done it even in my 20s. I don't know if I could have done it in my 20s
yeah.
because I didn't have the connections that I do today. Today I'm a little blessed the fact of, being almost 28, 29 years in the booking business of just working with so many different talents over the years. I have that luxury, whereas a different store starts out, how do I book a Kurt Angle to come in and do my store appearance like that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's now I have that kind of a little bit of a luxury doing that, so that it helps. So that does take away some aspects, but all that behind the scenes stuff, as you know, Mike, taxes and having to go and take care of, make sure your books are on par, making sure your inventory flow is coming through. This is all stuff that I didn't care about that stuff in my 20s, 30s, even in my 40s, because hell, in my 40s, I was off the grid, man. I was 100% off the grid. So don't worry, IRS. I took care of all my stuff.
I came down with my buddy a year ago, and I'm explaining to him what this is, and he's like, I can walk into a wrestling store and hang out there all day long. I said, "Yep, that's what this is." And he thought that was the coolest thing in the world. Would have been his dream job.
So many people who come in here goes like, "Holy shit, this place exists!" Like a friend of mine told me there was a wrestling store. I had no idea. Like just today, the guy who the guy I was telling you earlier came by and left a review. He came and goes, "Yeah, a friend of mine came to your Kurt Angle and your Jimmy Hart signing and told me that this whole store is just nothing but pro wrestling, dude. You got to come in there and check it out." And he goes and he looks at my ceiling, and I got the ceiling of fame, all the guys' handprints and signatures up on the ceiling. And they're like, "Holy shit, these guys have all been here?" They're like, "Dude, I got to come here more often."
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I got a great respect for you guys doing business. I've had my share of retail as well, and we won't get into that. But especially doing it in a card store or a wrestling themed thing. It's like when I started in music as a kid, I was into music as well, Mike, and I started a production facility and a recording studio, and
Mhm.
my business grew from there into replication of making CDs and cassettes. But you're in an environment, you're in an industry that you enjoy. And Tony, you're in the wrestling collectibles industry. How perfect is that? So
Would have told my 25-year-old me, I would have told you, what are you smoking now?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, thanks again for
So,
joining us, and congratulations on all your success with the podcast. And give our best to Anthony. We don't hear from him as much directly anymore. And good luck with that in the future. Do you want to just give everyone your coordinates before we sign off?
I'm at Mike Sapperdeck 1 on Twitter, and you can find me at Mike's Retro Trading Cards on YouTube.
Tony, in
Awesome,
case no
man.
one
Yeah.
knows.
No, I just no, wrestlingtradingcards.com. I mean, if you don't know that by now, you're on the wrong channel. But yeah, I thanks for coming on, Mike. When Paul pitched your names like that, I said, hell yeah. Like I was thinking that same thing. So oftentimes Paul and I are oftentimes thinking the same thing, and then come
Mhm.
back later going, yeah, I was thinking that too. I was going to talk to you about that, but I forgot or something like that. It's like, yeah. So I'm happy you came on. So
Yeah,
thanks.
awesome,
Glad to
guys.
be here. Thanks
Yeah,
for the
thanks. I'm Paul, also from WrestlingTradingCards.com and the Wrestling Card Price Guide. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll be back in a couple of weeks.